Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rosa Escareño, the Interim General Superintendent and CEO of the Chicago Park District. First, I want to recognize the other leaders that are here with me today. Chicago Park District Board of Commissioners President Avis LaVelle, Park District Interim Inspector General Allison Corona, Valerie Hayes, partner at the Arnold and Porter Law Firm, Nikki Baser, partner at the Franzik Law Firm, and Jason Patterson, associate at the Franzik Law Firm. When I took over as interim general superintendent and CEO less than 3 weeks ago, my top priority was to see this investigation to its fruition and to work tirelessly to hold wrongdoers accountable while building a new culture here at the Chicago Park District that prioritizes accountability, transparency, and safety. Today marks a major step forward towards that goal. This afternoon, you will hear from these lead investigators that have been doing the critical work investigating wrongdoing at the Park District among the lifeguards and critically the management staff that for too long allowed sexual misconduct to go unpunished. First, you will hear from the Interim Inspector General Allison Corona, who will outline the findings of her third quarter report. This report provides the latest update on the ongoing investigation into sexual misconduct at the Beaches and Pools unit of the Park District. Then you will hear from Valerie Hayes, who will detail the conclusion of her special investigation into the mishandling of the sexual misconduct complaints by Chicago Park District management. I won't go into the details on these reports as these experts are here to provide you that summary of all their efforts. I will encourage all of you to read the reports. One thing I will say about the findings of these reports is that park management failed our workers. I received the Arnold and Porter report last night, and I was absolutely stunned and horrified by what I read. My heart aches for the brave young women who reported these horrible, pervasive acts of misconduct, and they were met with silence and inaction. And let me be clear, this is not just an issue that affects women and girls that stepped up and made these complaints. As a mother of a young boy, it is important for me to ensure that this organization leads and ensures that we are making the best example for all our young workers and the kids and families that rely so much on our services and programs. When we allow a culture of disrespect and abuse to foster, when we allow male supervisors to set an example of misconduct, we are failing all of our young people. As public servants, as employers, and as human beings, to be honest, we have a responsibility to take the allegations of sexual misconduct seriously. And those in power failed in that duty. And for that, on behalf of the Chicago Park District, I am sorry. The public release of these reports is just the first step. And after you hear from these experts today, I will come back to detail the actions that we are taking in reaction to these reports to ensure that nothing like this happens again. Before passing it to my colleagues, I want to end with a message to the survivors of sexual misconduct. Know that we hear you, we see you, and we are acting. We will never tolerate misconduct of any kind or a code of silence that turns a blind eye towards horrifying behavior. I promise you that we will not stop short of full transparency, full accountability, and full safety for Park District staff and patrons. Now, I want to welcome Avis LaVelle, President of the Park District Board of Commissioners.
Thank you, Rosa. Good afternoon. On behalf of myself, the Board of Commissioners, and the entire CPD staff, let me say that we owe both a sincere apology and a debt of gratitude to the brave young women who came forward to share painful stories of humiliation and abuse at the hands of colleagues and supervisors as lifeguards in the Chicago Park District. No one expected it would take so long or so much outside assistance to get to the point where we know exactly what happened and who was responsible. Their allegations were credible and taken seriously from the point they were turned over to the Inspector General in March of 2020. That's when I learned about it. But we were simply dysfunctional in our approach to the investigation, and I apologize for what has been a slow, tortured process. The OIG at the Chicago Park District was set up in 2013 by former President Brian Traubert and Superintendent Mike Kelly, or then Superintendent. The OIG was not envisioned at that time to investigate allegations of sexual assault or harassment. The OIG's traditional scope was investigating operational issues that could be addressed through tighter management policies and practices, things like residency violations, employee theft of property or time card abuse, vendor contract non-compliance, or even misconduct by park advisory councils. The Chicago Park District OIG was designed to be independent, but also collaborative, not confrontational. The IG reports directly to the board president, but also periodically would brief the president and superintendent about ongoing probes and recommendations for corrective measures. As established by the Park District Code, OIG investigations reported out when there were findings. Ongoing probes were kept confidential. Now, it's a delicate balance to keep the OIG at arm's distance while at the same time have the office report directly to the president and indirectly to the superintendent in a collaborative fashion to correct operational flaws as they're uncovered. What I wanted to share with the entire CPD board about this investigation was not just allegations, but concrete findings, disciplinary action, and to report to them that the district leadership had moved promptly to address this problem with better training and management reorganization. I was assured repeatedly by former Superintendent Mike Kelly throughout the process that management was taking corrective steps to address these problems system-wide. What I never expected was that it would take so long to get to the point of holding accountable those who are responsible. In hindsight, it would have been better for me to step outside the usual OIG reporting structure to share with the entire CPD board earlier, even though there was little substantiated evidence. But there's a bigger picture here also. If not for this unfortunate situation, we might never have had a complete appreciation of the deficiencies that exist at the Chicago Park District with respect to our approach to personnel practices and also investigatory issues. So we have seized this opportunity to examine how our OIG office is structured, its scope of work, its accountability, and its reporting structure to the Chicago Park District and the Board of Commissioners. I asked Allison Verona, who established the Park District's OIG office, to come back and help us understand how so much could have gone so wrong and where the OIG had strayed from its mission and its procedures since she left years ago. We now have much more insight as to how that office should be structured and staffed going forward, what its scope of work should be now, and how to integrate the OIG more closely into the Chicago Park District's more proactive and responsive efforts to protect our most valuable resources, which are our patrons and our workforce. The OIG's office will also emerge from this situation better positioned within CPD, more directly connected with the board and staffed differently to reflect a revised scope of work envisioned now for its office. I have asked the board to form an oversight committee where 2 other board members will join the president for regular OIG briefings and reports from the CPD's new Office of Protection, which is in the process of being set up. The role of HR at the Chicago Park District in the way delicate investigatory matters are handled is outdated, isolated, and inadequate. Superintendent Escareño is working on that now, and she'll be able to provide more details. IG Perona also told us that years ago, the OIG would attend executive sessions with the entire CPD Board of Commissioners to give summary briefings at a high level on resolved cases, but also on ongoing probes. We will reinstitute that OIG practice, which ended sometime before I became the board president. The board and CPD's new management team have consulted with the Chicago Public Schools and also reached out to the Archdiocese of Chicago to learn from their experiences how to create an integrated internal structure to assure that all appropriate steps are taken to prevent problems like this where possible and to promptly investigate and report on allegations of abuse. Additionally, CPD is re-examining how the OIG coordinates with human resources in its newly created office focused on safeguarding park patrons and employees. This office will strengthen our ability to assure the well-being of those who visit and those who work at the park facilities. So all of this will work together to ensure clear lines of responsibility and accountability for timely investigations of all complaints with a high priority given to this matter, such as it deserves. As members of the Chicago Park District Board, even as president, we are volunteers who set policy, but we lack visibility into the day-to-day operations and management decisions of the Chicago Park District. There's a trust factor there. We don't work for the Chicago Park District. We know what management and staff tell us. Most of us hold full-time jobs elsewhere. We're not in their offices with them. In fact, almost no one was in the office or workplace when I became aware of these allegations in March of 2020 as the COVID shutdown got underway. At that time, CPD's limited staff was scrambling to provide programs and resources for the children of essential workers while schools were closed. The investigation was turned over to the Inspector General, and the probe was fully supported by the board through its president. Throughout the months, I was repeatedly assured by Superintendent Kelly that his staff was working on and implementing a plan to reorganize the beaches and pool staff and enhance training and reporting procedures across the board on sexual harassment and assault, particularly before they began hiring summer lifeguards in the event that they would. Kelly told me that one of the initial reports came from the daughter of a longtime friend and assured me it was a high priority. That reinforced my belief that he would do all he could to promptly address the many problems. As you will hear from one of our investigators, Val Hayes, that didn't happen. We are brought to this point by 2 young women who were brave enough to break the code of silence that has apparently existed for some time in the aquatics division of the Park District. Like Rosa, I grew up in the Chicago parks, and I volunteer on this board because I know how vitally important parks are in our communities. We have beautiful parks and we care deeply about them. At this point, I think it's important to emphasize that the majority of the Chicago Park District workforce is comprised of committed, hardworking parks and recreation professionals whose careers are spent in the service of people young and old who use our parks. It's heartbreaking to learn of the abuse inflicted on young people like me who came to the parks for a safe haven or a wonderful summer job, and shocking to learn how long this disgraceful conduct seems to have existed. So on behalf of my fellow commissioners and those who came before us over the years, I sincerely apologize to everyone who has been harmed by this behavior and this culture of the beach and pool division, and by the district's failure to address this abuse in a timely manner. We are making real progress now with a professional team of investigators who are dedicated to uncovering every aspect of this ugly, disgusting story. This kind of humiliation and the abuse of girls and women should never have been tolerated, let alone allowed to fester for who knows how long. We must eradicate this culture. We will eradicate this culture. That is our commitment. Thank you. Now, I'll turn it over to Allison.
Today, the Office of Inspector General is releasing the third quarter report. And inside the third quarter report are investigations regarding conclusions of investigations related to 4 of the lifeguard investigations. 3 of those investigations date back to the complaints starting in 2020. In May and June of this year, then Inspector General Elaine Little realized that she needed additional assistance in conducting the investigations in these cases, and she engaged the law firm of Transit. 2 representatives from the law firm who worked on the case have been introduced and are here with us today, Nikki Baser and Jason Patterson. They have worked collaboratively with the Office of Inspector General's office to bring these 4 cases to a conclusion. As you all know, if you're aware of the reports from the Office of Inspector General, some of the information from our investigations is confidential, notably the names of the people involved in the cases, any of the contact information, and anything that could identify them, because again, the confidentiality of the nature of our investigations. Especially true in this particular situation with the nature of the allegations: sexual assault, sexual misconduct, bullying, harassment. It's even more important that we protect the identities of these young women and that we don't dwell too much on the nature of the assaults. We passed out today, and it's also available as I speak on the website, the Office of Inspector General website, a link to our third quarter report, and there is a summary of each of these investigations. The Office of Inspector General found credible evidence that these assaults occurred, and we made recommendations to management to ensure that all 4 men would no longer be employed by the Chicago Park District. The investigations are ongoing. We will continue to work on them both individually as the Office of Inspector General. Forensic is still working on some of the investigations. The Office of Inspector General is also working collaboratively with both the board and management to enact new policies and procedures, enhance programs already in place in order to ensure that these types of allegations going forward are handled in a sensitive manner and in a manner that ensures fair and just results for everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valerie Hayes. On September 20th of this year, the Board of Commissioners retained Arlen Porter to investigate 3 specific issues. The first is the sufficiency and timeliness of the Park District's response to complaints by 2 women who served as lifeguards for the Park District. The first woman reported being a victim of sexual harassment, assault, hazing, bullying, and similar types of conduct. The second woman reported being a victim of sexual assault and sexual harassment. Both women described a widespread pattern of this type of conduct in the lifeguard community, including retaliation and code of silence. Multiple interviews have been conducted since that time, and their statements have been corroborated by many others. This was an independent investigation. We had full discretion regarding the appropriate investigative steps. I should mention the second issue we looked at were reporting on the status of the OIG's investigation of these 2 initial complaints and all of the additional subjects that were identified during the course of those original 2 investigations. We also were asked to report on the status of the corrective actions taken to date by the Park District. We found sufficient evidence that Michael Kelly, the General Superintendent and CEO of the Park District during all relevant times, and 2 members of his management team violated the CPD's policies and procedures by not promptly reporting or responding to the first woman's complaints and allegations. A third supervisor did not promptly respond to the second woman's complaints. or report them. The first woman's parents, we learned during our investigation, reported to Mr. Kelly via email the first woman's allegations, a summary of them, on August 30th of 2019, over 6 months before Mr. Kelly reported the allegations to the Inspector General. He shared this email with his Chief Programs Officer on August 30th of 2019. The woman herself emailed a more detailed version of her allegations to Mr. Kelly directly on February 7th of 2020, and he shared this email with his Chief Programs Officer, who then summarized portions of the complaint for the Assistant Director of Recreation. It was not reported to the Inspector General's office until 41 days after that. The second woman emailed her complaint to the manager of beaches and pools on or about March 9th of 2020. He did not report it until August of 2020, approximately 5 months later, when the Inspector General sent him a document request. With respect to the status of the OIG's investigation of these complaints and the ones that arose from them, we found no evidence of intentional interference with the investigations. The investigations have taken significantly longer than they should have taken. We found that the delays were due in large part to the lack of experience of the OIG staff with these types of investigations, high turnover of OIG leadership, uncooperative witnesses, and logistical challenges caused by the pandemic, and the fact that many of these witnesses were seasonal employees and difficult to locate. The Park District has taken corrective actions in response to the lifeguard complaints to improve its workplace culture, including better training and more oversight. Unfortunately, the ramp up of those corrective action initiatives did not really begin in large part until April of 2021, when these stories first began being reported in the press. The district recognizes that there's a lot more work to be done, including a new complaint reporting and investigation process. The Board of Commissioners have stated they are committed to overseeing this process and ensuring that the Park District provides a safe and comfortable working environment for its employees going forward.
Thank you, Valerie. As the interim superintendent, I can't change what happened, but I can commit to doing everything in my power to hold wrongdoers accountable and to make sure nothing like this happens again. That commitment includes immediate next steps and long-term solutions. Most immediately, we are committed to full accountability. Supervisors of sexual assault deserve to know that their complaints will be taken seriously. Survivors. And survivors of sexual assault deserve to know that their complaints will be taken seriously and be fully investigated. As superintendent, you may have, I'm losing my place here. As superintendent, you have my commitment that I will allow the investigations to be conducted independently, and that I will heed the recommendations of the investigations. That I will move quickly to take the disciplinary actions that these reports require. Upon receiving these reports last night, I immediately moved to dismiss all employees found to have committed sexual misconduct and 3 senior managers that failed in their responsibility to keep their employees safe. Failings of this nature will not be tolerated. In addition to the immediate disciplinary actions that I took, I am also committing to using the findings to enact real change across the district. As the president indicated earlier, I am committed to working collaboratively and in partnership with everybody here to ensure that the policies and operational structure of the agency is reviewed during my time there. Over the coming weeks, I will utilize again these findings to conduct an overhaul of the policies and the procedures to ensure that the clear protocols are in place for investigating complaints while ensuring that all employees are well trained and are able to identify and report the misconduct. Additionally, I will be working closely with the board president and the members to ensure that this Office of Protection, which is actually, we're in review of that becomes a very clear way to ensure that all victims or individuals that are seeking to report any wrongdoing at the Park District, that we have a clear process to do so. So again, I look forward to working in partnership with everyone to bring the change that is necessary. I am committed to putting survivors first, and that's a priority. This means that ensuring that all survivors of sexual assault or misconduct have an easy access, not only to the support resources that they need in our, and that they are connected, it's to ensure that we increase the amount of steps that we take to address the brave steps that they have taken to report those complaints. So we cannot sit back and wait. We must make sure that we are listening and acting immediately. A key part of this overhaul will be, again, the Office of Protection. It's funded as part of our 2022 budget recommendations that were submitted last week. This office will be dedicated solely to investigating claims of sexual misconduct and other prohibited acts with the proper resources and staffing, expertise necessary to properly investigate these claims. In my first 3 weeks as superintendent, I have seen firsthand that the Park District does so many amazing things, and that there are so many wonderful workers across our entire system. I've already been to 2 events where we've announced wonderful programs that impact our communities in such a positive way. And so we have hundreds of and thousands of employees that are working diligently every day and responsibly to provide recreational programs and green space for hundreds of thousands of families and kids across our city. We do so much good, but if we can't fulfill our responsibility to keep our employees and patrons safe, then it is all for naught. Today marks a new day in the Park District, and we have a monumental task ahead of us. But you have my commitment, our commitment, that we will not rest until we have done everything necessary to rebuild the trust and put survivors first. With that, we will open it up for questions.
Rosa, you mentioned 3 people that you said that you moved the fire last night, right? And you didn't say who they were, but there's 3 people that are still with the Park District that are mentioned here: Eric Fisher, Adam Bueling, and Alonzo Williams. They're the ones who are gone, I assume?
Yes.
And I'd like to follow up on that for Ms. Lavelle, because the
Sure.
Lavelle question. There's an allegation in here that no corrective actions were taken between the time of the second complaint, which is when you learned about this in March of 2020, and the story that came out in April of 2021. Why not take any sort of reform actions for over a year, knowing that there are issues? I mean, without interfering in the investigation, couldn't some reforms have been
I
taken?
was assured by Superintendent Kelly that he was taking, and first planning at the beginning and then taking reform actions. You have to understand the way boards operate, at least how public boards operate. You don't have visibility into the day-to-day operations because you're not an employee, you're not integrated into the operations, so you know what you are told. It's a trust factor here. So management tells you what management and staff are doing. They tell you what they're planning, they tell you what they're implementing. But you don't have the visibility into it to see exactly what it is that they're doing. So I operated based on what I was told was happening. At the beginning of this process, the superintendent told me it was a priority increase, and I believe that. He told me that, and he told Will Fletcher at the time, who was the IG, that they were already working on changing the reporting structure at pools and beaches so that they could make sure that some of the people who were alleged at that time to be abusive wouldn't be in position to do some of the things that were alleged that they were doing. I can only operate by what I'm told at the Park District.
One follow-up question, if I can. Deceit, you said, was the reason that you supported the resignation, and the forced resignation really, of Mike Kelly last month. Which of these things, many things in the report, was the deceit that you were referring to at that time? Was it this corrective action? Was it the 6 months instead of 6 weeks before that? Was it the press conference at the beach in August where he told us that he had, gone after 40-plus people when only a fraction of them? What was
All
the
of it.
deceit?
All of it. Because the investigation gave us visibility into what really happened versus what we were talking.
And can we just ask you, because you've been there longer, I mean, so how long have you been the president of the Board of Commissioners?
I started as president in February of 2019.
Okay, so not that long. So when you were coming in, did you have any inkling that the culture in this department was as rotten as it appears to be?
I don't think any commissioner or anybody that has ever sat in this seat or on the board had any idea of what really was going on here.
Did you have any suspicions, given the power dynamics between lifeguards, young women, and managers, and people maybe who haven't gone to Kellogg MBA schools and don't really know the modern ways of managing people, might be in a situation that is, let's call it unprofessional? Do you have any inclination before all this broke that this was so rotten to the board?
I don't think so. I don't think that anybody had, in fact, I know I certainly didn't, and I don't think that anybody who would sit on a board like this would tolerate any behavior like that if they knew it existed, or if they thought it existed.
Did you ever get outside of your realm of comfort and taking these meetings and doing all the executive work and go and talk to people who work for the park district? Or did you just take everybody else's word for it that things were going well?
I have been to many park facilities.
Did you ever talk to anyone about how things were going?
I have been to many park facilities and talked to many employees. Did I interview any lifeguards? No, I did not. Did you have a question for me? No.
I heard Interim Superintendent Escareño said that employees of the Chicago Park District rest assured that this sort of conduct will be tolerated going forward. How can employees trust that if you are still the president of the board and you acknowledge that you did not do enough to make sure that these complaints were handled appropriately?
I disagree with your premise that I have said I did not do enough. That's not what
You said you trusted Mike Kelly and that you regret that in retrospect.
I do regret that. But what I will say is that it is not within the control of the board or in control of the board president to be able to determine exactly what is happening at the Chicago Park District or any entity where you're operating. The board operates at a level where you are operating based on what you're told and based on trust. You have to be able to trust the administrator to tell you what is going on.
But do you understand how unacceptable that, do you understand how unacceptable that answer is to the citizens of Chicago? Honestly, given how deep this problem is and how systemic it is to the way this place is run, not this place, but the whole department, do you understand how sort of passing the buck that sounds, how unacceptable that sounds?
It is not acceptable that any of this continued to happen. It is not acceptable that this started long before any of us that I'm aware of were here. It's all unacceptable. And I accept my responsibility as a person who was sitting in this chair at the time that this was exposed. I can't be responsible for the people who came before me. I can be responsible for my part in it. And I have accepted that mistakes were made. It was a dysfunctional investigative process. It was a dysfunctional response process. But there are many factors. And some of this rests with the management of the park district who did not tell us the truth.
Is anyone else? I'm going to finish my question. You worked at City Hall for many years under Mr. Bailey. You probably more than anyone in the city of Chicago, I imagine, understands how these things work. So again, why are you not ultimately responsible for the girls that were abused during your tenure as president of the board?
Let me As president of the Park District Board, I am responsible for the oversight of the board and for interfacing with the Inspector General to make sure that the Inspector General has the resources to adequately investigate. The board is, as a whole, responsible for working with management to try and ensure, based on what management tells us, that what they are doing is in the best interest of the citizens that we serve.
One more question. So, you talked about this Office of Protection and changing the regulation that will investigate moving forward. But how do you prevent this from happening again? What can you make on the forefront to prevent this sort of thing from happening?
So, I just want to make one point clear about the office protection. So, the previous superintendent was part of the proposal going forward, and certainly I think the concept is a good one. Been working very closely with board leadership to ensure that we have an opportunity with this quote-unquote office of protection. We don't even know if that's the correct name, but we're alluding to that because we want to make sure you understand what we're talking about here. We need to take this opportunity to tear everything apart and figure out how we rebuild it in a way that does exactly what we intend to do. How do we find clarity for the victims or anyone who wants to report any violation of this nature to the park district? Where does it sit? Clear information about where to go, and clear information about what is going to be investigated. Clear tracking of that investigation, ensuring that as we are receiving investigations or complaints, that we are tracking it and monitoring and seeing everything through. Right now, there is just confusion as to, or there was appeared to be confusion as to where, these sort of complaints would go. So it is apparent to me coming into this organization that if the management did not send some of these complaints to HR or to IG initially, look, I can't speak for them, but I will tell you that it is clear to me that there isn't a clear entry point into how we make these reporting structures, safe in terms of individuals feeling that they can come to the park district, report something, and that we're going to act on it. I think as you read the reports, one of the really sad things for me is that these women tried to do the right thing, and it went unheard. The ball got dropped at several levels. And so we need to build a system that no matter where this report is going, people should not be going to their supervisor. People should go, employees should be able to go to a direct place where their information is protected, that there is confidentiality, and that we have accountability on every aspect of how these reports are coming in. We are not done, but this is something that is a top priority for us.
Rosa,
Thank you, everyone.
we have some more questions.
Could
This
we
is
ask
too
a question
important.
we didn't get to back here either?
That is one sort of report, how do you prevent people from having to report or reducing that kind of behavior?
Well, again, look, this is just one piece. There is training that is needed. There is, again, I am 3 weeks in. There needs to be an overhaul of operationally how the park district has been operating. Every level from top to bottom, we need to make sure that there is proper training, proper awareness, proper information, and most importantly for me, that there is transparency and accountability. We need to make sure that whether it's a supervisor or a worker that is not providing the notices as they comes to them, we need to make sure that when you have a duty to report, that you are reporting. The lack of reporting is already a violation, a policy violation. So something as small as that needs to be tightened, needs to be informed, needs to be well communicated. Lots of work to do. So this is just scratching the surface. I don't want you to take what I'm saying as the end-all be-all. We're just scratching the surface on the kinds of things that need to be reformed.
Have you reached out to complainant one or two?
Can we take
Have you actually, the actual survivors, have you actually reached out in your short time to complainant number one and complainant number two? You say that you are going to ensure they have easy access and resources that are needed. Can you be very specific about, have you reached out, and what are those resources?
So I will answer that, but then we're gonna go to the last question is, number one is, in my short term here, my job is to not compromise the investigation. I will allow the investigators to tell you who has contacted the victims. I did not want to get in the way of that, but I will tell you that I am talking to individuals that have been lifeguards before, that have shared their experiences with me. And my goal is to ensure that I'm actually building a network with other individuals that have worked at the park district before, so that we can learn from their experiences, understand some of the areas that they think we need to improve. We can't solve this by ourselves. We need those voices to tell us what we're doing wrong. I'm always, people that know me know that I bring partners to the table. I am open to that conversation, and I want to learn from others. The critics, I want to know what is happening, what is going wrong. We need to learn from that, and I am committed to doing that in my short few weeks. Go ahead.
Well, you said the 3 senior level managers were fired. Do you anticipate any other higher level firings or management changes? It sounds as though with all the questions, the board president is not stepping down. Are there any other senior level changes that are coming to get a true clean slate?
As I have indicated in my remarks, I am fully committed to accountability across the entire park district system. I will work very closely with the investigators that are continuing their investigation, and I will heed their recommendations as quickly and as transparently as possible. But that's not the end all be all. I need more time to review the policies, procedures, and operational structure within the agency, and will report that accordingly. Okay, thank you, everybody.
I just want to ask you, when you looked into this, did you look at communications between the IG's office and the Park District Board or the Park District CEO during the course of the investigation?
Yes, and to a certain extent, and what I found is summarized in detail